I am 24.
24 years old, y'all. 24 years old, buying $1 million properties, getting to the bag, baby. Good evening, good evening, good evening. What's up? What's up? This is Tony Glenn with the SITREP podcast, where we talk about real estate investing, life hacks, and much, much more. Today, I have my man Brian Coons on the show. Let's go. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. What's up, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Man, let's unpack this thing, man. I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Hey, you just bought a multi-unit.
I did. I closed a few months ago now. It's March right now. I closed in July of last year and got my first 4-unit property under my belt. Living in one of them right now, renting out the extra rooms I have, and learning a lot of stuff along the way for sure.
That's insane, man. So let me ask you a couple of questions, man. Where are you from?
Originally, I'm from Ohio. Born and raised. Grew up right outside Cleveland. Real suburban area. Just super, middle class. Didn't do anything wild. But then joined the military right out of high school. Went over to Virginia for schooling, and then got stationed in North Carolina for my first enlistment.
Okay. Oh God, North Carolina, man.
North Carolina, yeah. I think anyone who knows the two areas, which is Cherry Point or Lejeune, I was at Cherry Point.
Okay.
Everyone kind of knows, and you just kind of have to don't have to say anything at that point. But yeah, after that, moved right over here, and been here for almost 2 years now. So. Indeed,
man. And what brought you to California? The military, obviously, right?
The military did, for sure. So I volunteered to become a drill instructor, and definitely was hoping to choose San Diego out of the two, which is San Diego or South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And just, I went to boot camp in Parris Island in South Carolina, and was like, the weather is not exactly, consistent all year long. So if I'm going to be miserable, I may as well be miserable in some sunny weather that's not super hot all the time. So.
That's crazy, man. Check this out. In 2004, that is what brought me here, MCRD San Diego, to be a drill instructor. All right. So we kind of follow along the same path. Now, the big question, let's get to the bag, baby. What made you get into real estate?
You did, actually. Going back to right when I got here, we were at the schoolhouse to become drill instructors, and you actually are the one who comes and talks to us about the VA loan, and you give a couple gold nuggets that I don't think I think it goes over most people's heads, honestly, of the power of real estate. And at the time, I couldn't buy a house because I'm not married or anything. I'm a single dude right now, that I don't get the housing allowance that people get when they're here, when they're married. So in my mind, I couldn't afford a house at the time, but I was like, okay, but when I do, I should probably know about real estate, because that kind of looks like a good path to go down. And from there, I just, I got that little nugget from you, and it sprouted into me actually reading a book, which was weird because I hadn't done that in a while. And read a couple books on real estate, started learning as much as I could along the way. Obviously, being a drill instructor is not exactly very free time full.
Sure.
So the little time that I had definitely was trying to learn as much as I could. And then the next year, a couple things happened along the way that I was able to get that housing allowance and be able to really dive in real quick, and closed on a house probably about a month and a half after I was like, okay, I'm going to do this.
That's crazy, man. So let me tell you a fun fact, man. Check this out. So when I give the class at MCRD San Diego, this young man right here is the first one out of all of the classes that I have done. This is the first one that actually bought a multi-unit. Now, I have a question for you. For the class, what was the key thing that triggered you to want to go down the path? Was it something, what resonated with you in the class?
So I remember it. I think this is what it was. I think it was your little, your 1 minute course on how to make $100,000 in 3 years. I think that's what it was. And I can't remember at the time, I think most of the things went over my head, but I was just like, ooh, money, I guess. But I think it was like, debt pay down, appreciation, and tax write-offs was like some of the main things that I got from that. And all of it, came to like, oh, hey, real estate just seems like the way to make money. And we obviously had started off of like, ooh, I want to make money. But no, it's at this point turned into so many more things along the way.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it segued into a lot more things. Now, So a multi-unit now where is this actually located?
So this is right outside downtown San Diego if you're familiar, Sherman Heights, Logan Heights area, right below Balboa Park. And definitely at the moment, not the nicest block out of all of the blocks around us, but all around us is very clearly becoming a lot nicer.
Right.
Which is when you want to get in, really.
That's crazy. So how long have you been in the Marine Corps?
I've been in for almost 6.5 years now.
Okay, 6.5 years. So you were a E5 when you?
Yes, yeah, I came over here. I'd been an E5 for almost like 2.5 years at that point.
Okay.
And then I got over here.
So. Okay, that's crazy, man. So check this out. So I have a hard question for you. How much was the property that you purchased?
So I purchased it. The purchase price was $1.231 million. And with the VA funding fee that they just throw on top of the loan, which comes out to like $2 a month over 30 years, was 1.259.
Okay, so check this out. E5. Listen to me. E5, y'all. E5 buying a multi-unit. How many units are in the?
It's 4 units.
4 units. Okay. So 4 units. Right around 1.3. And do you have tenants in each one?
So I did inherit tenants in all 3 of the units. It actually, when I bought it, it was a flip property. So somebody purchased it like about almost a year before I bought it, and looks like they fixed it. Like on Google Maps, it's still the old paint and old roof and stuff like that. And they got tenants in 2 months before I bought it, and then mine still happened to be empty, and I moved into that one. So.
Insane. So you live in one, and then you rent out the other 3.
Correct. And then I also rent out the rooms in mine as well. So I have 3 rooms in mine, and the other 2 rooms I have rented out to. So I have 3 roommates right now.
So that is the epitome of house hacking, right? He's trying to get the bag, baby. And you can tell that this is unscripted, man, because y'all know y'all heard my cell phone go off. But hey, this is real veterans talking about real life hacks on how they got the bag and became financially stable through real estate. Okay, so I do have a question for you. Let's unpack this multi-unit. So were there any challenges along the way when you were going through the loan process?
So for me, there actually weren't. Looking back now, there definitely could have been. Going back to kind of why it was easier for me was my credit score was already good. I had a decent amount in savings already just from my first enlistment. I was living frugally, saving money, things like that. And then, all of I didn't have any debt or anything like that. And my car was at this point, I think it was paid off.
Right.
So everything I was doing right. I didn't know that I was what I was doing it for, but I just was generally, I guess, doing the right things along the way. And then, so I would literally talk to the agent I was working with, and we'd send a property to the lender, and he would just be like, yeah, you qualify for it, make an offer. And we just continued doing that. I didn't realize that at the time qualifying for a $1.2 million property was a problem. I just thought if you're crazy enough to buy it, you can buy it.
That's good.
And it turns out that you have to have a certain amount of income to qualify for however much the loan on the mortgage payment is going to be per month. And I just continued to, analyze the properties myself conservatively. So if I was analyzing it and the numbers worked and I was willing to make an offer on it, the underwriter, who's the person who makes sure that you qualify for it, kind of did the same thing. So I qualified for all the properties I wanted to qualify for.
That's good, man. So let me ask you another question. During the process, did you ever have any reservations about finishing out the deal? Was there a fear of buying or biting off that much financial responsibility?
Not really, honestly. I was so sold on real estate at this point, because at this point, this was about almost a year after, a little over a year after you talked to me and gave me. So I read 3 books over the course of the next year, and then that next month and a half when I was hitting hard, I was just talking to people, reading books, listening to podcasts, and there was just so many people that have done this already.
Right.
That it's okay, even the bad stories, if they waited long enough, they looked smart. So I knew at that point, it's okay, even if I really jack this up, I, number one, have a substantial amount of savings to help me survive if something goes really, really wrong. But it's probably not going to go super wrong.
Right.
And yeah, people look at that short term, do I make do I make $100 a door, like living there? It's like, okay. Or if you wait a year in a market that the price is going to go up, the house is now going to be worth a substantial amount more than that $100 a month that you would make. So it's like, look for the long term, not just the short term little $100 like cash flow, I guess.
Man, that's really good. One thing that you said that resonates with me really, really well is that a lot of people want the championship belt, but they don't want to get punched in the face, right? Get up to the plate, get in the game. If you're trying to get into real estate, the only way you're going to learn about it is getting in. And you did just that. And it seems like it's going pretty well for you. What do you cash flow? What do you pay a month? This is what I want to know. What do you pay a month on that property?
Yeah, so I'll go through the numbers, and we can get into it after, but I will assume that I'm actually renting out the unit downstairs, and I don't have a crackhead living there who's not paying rent. But
okay.
When it's rented out at like a pretty conservative market value, I'm getting $2,450 for the 3.2, and then $2,075 for one of the 3.1s, and then probably be able to get close to $2,200 for the other 3.1 once it's rented out. And for my unit, I'm actually getting $2,100 a month for those 2 rooms rented out. So I'm actually getting more on mine renting out 2 rooms than I'm getting for the other unit for 3 rooms. So
okay.
that all comes out to like 8,800.
Yeah, 87, 800, somewhere around
800. But my expenses on it, all expenses was like close to like 7,500 within. That's with property management. That's with like some CapEx reserves, things like that. But now my mortgage is actually getting dropped. The interest rate is getting dropped from 2.75 to 2.25. So that's actually going to be an extra like $300 a month in cash flow going into it. So it'll cash flow while I'm living there, probably close to like $500 to $700 a month, like pure cash flow.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's really unpack this thing. Okay, so all right, so you paid 1.2. Okay, and I did a CMA, a cloud market analysis of the property, and right now that property is worth 1.4, 1.5 minus the improvements that you've already done to the property. So you already went up in your equity position, and then you're paying down your principal payment, and plus your cash flow in that thing so you can turn up in Vegas. Let's go.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the craziest things for me that I really, once you open your eyes to it, it's like you got to be crazy not to invest in real estate, because people just see like, oh, like I don't want to change toilets at 2 a.m, and if
Sure.
it doesn't cash flow $100, like it's a bad deal. And it's like, when you look at that, it's like I've owned it for less than a year, and I've obviously, like with the guy living there that wasn't paying rent and everything, and there were a couple things that I fixed. So I'm a few $1,000s into it, but my net worth, and like if I were to sell it right now, like it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's pennies in the bucket for like the repairs and stuff that I'm doing right now. And people don't pay attention to that. So if you do, like you can really skyrocket what the end goal is, obviously, is to have get that significant net worth to be able to then turn it into some really good cash flowing assets and be able to live your life. Like,
now, another thing that I heard, okay, so buying in San Diego, 1, you're right by the beach. Number 2, you're in a military scenario to where there's a lot of military folk around, so you're not going to have an issue with renting. And then plus you're a service member, so veterans pretty much link together, right? So it'll be easy for you to rent those units out and then potentially get a service member that wants to live in your unit. So it's a win-win-win-win situation for you, right?
Yeah, it makes it super easy in that area. Looking back, I didn't really know that these were all good things going into it. But yeah, now that I'm seeing it, it's like, yeah, it's a great area. There's a lot of diversity there. There's a lot of good, stable jobs that are there. And yeah, like the connections already. I already have somebody who has a buddy who's stationed in Pendleton that wants to live in the unit that I'm about to re-rent out. Like it's so clear that you have those connections, and you just, it works. It works really well.
That's awesome, man. So now I talked about the good, now the bad. Now what, you said you have a couple of $1,000s into that, and then you do have a tenant. So are you able to, have you talked to a tax professional about that unit that is not owner occupied yet?
In what regards?
To be able to possibly deduct the loss for that unit not being rented out.
Yeah, the damages will definitely be a tax write-off along the way, getting it fixed up. And yeah, there's definitely lessons learned from all that. And he was an inherited tenant when I got there. However, I did renew the lease with him.
Sure.
So at this point, it is my fault because I renewed the lease with him. And so basically, story is he and one other guy were living there. The other guy was actually the one paying the rent and lived there. July to October, they were fine paying rent, nothing weird at all. And then about 2 weeks after we renewed the lease, the guy who was paying the rent called and was like, hey, I think my roommate's using heroin, so I don't want to live here anymore. So he left. And he actually was they're both disabled veterans, quote unquote.
Okay.
Not quote unquote, they are disabled veterans because they had addiction problems, I think, or overdosing problems, something like that with drugs prior to. I don't really know the full story, but they were in rehab for it. And the one guy moved out, and we got stuck with the one who was using again.
Okay.
And turned into, originally this was mid-October, where we emailed him and asked him if he was just willing to leave since the other guy was paying rent, and he agreed to it. And we were like, okay, cool. So you're going to leave at the end of October. And about 2 or 3 days before he was supposed to leave, he emailed us again and was like, hey, just kidding. I can't find somewhere else to live, so I have COVID. And but we were like, you already agreed to leave. Like, what's going on? So essentially, it all came down to because he agreed to leave already, that was what we were evicting him for. So we were able to evict him.
Oh, good.
So yeah, so like I said, he actually about 2 weeks ago got not forcibly, like they didn't actually pull him out, but we actually had sheriffs knock on the door and say, hey, grab your stuff, get out. And yeah, so the whole time there's, a lot of fun, interesting stories along the way. He definitely had some friends come into the property that weren't supposed to be there. But yeah, we went through the process. I learned a lot along the way of it, and definitely excited to get somebody in there now that is not as well endowed in the drugs that aren't fun.
Oh, that's crazy, man.
Yeah.
So if you look at that, you've had that property for about 9-10 months, somewhere around there?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So what do you believe your total, how much money did you put down to get the property?
So I actually made about $800 when I closed the property.
What?
So the lender that I went with had a lender's credit for the closing costs and everything like that. And it all came out at the close of the property. I technically had to bring $800 to the closing table, but because we closed early, the seller actually gave me a closing credit for $1,400.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it all evened out to, I made about $600 when I closed.
So basically you came out of no money out of pocket.
Absolutely right? No money out of pocket, which is why when people say like real estate's expensive, I'm like, not necessarily. It can be, maybe not be expensive for you though. Like,
sure.
That's the big thing.
That's really good. So let's unpack the interest rate reduction. So just so you guys know, if you are doing an interest rate reduction, it usually takes around, you have to be in the property for 6 months before you do the interest rate reduction. How easy was that?
I literally signed a couple of papers, and they were like, hey, we're going to have someone come over on Monday and you're going to sign your papers. It took like 15 minutes. And now I made an extra $400 to pay about $300 less per month.
That's insane, man.
It sounds dumb, but it's like, that's literally, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like,
that's legit, man. So let me ask you this question. What is your exit strategy? Like, why is it important for you to get into real estate now?
So for me, I definitely see real estate as just, no matter what I'm doing, having real estate is so easy to outsource if you don't have the time. That in a market where I am not by any stretch an economic master, but studied, listened to a lot of people smarter than me essentially about San Diego and stuff. And it was as long as you don't really buy stupid, it's pretty hard to mess up. So, getting as much as I can now and letting it more or less ride the appreciation wave, learn the ropes a little bit and kind of get into the space while I'm in, allows me to have a plan when I get out, or kind of have the freedom to get out and do what I want. And just for example, for me, I live pretty frugally. I spend probably anywhere between $1,500 and $2,000 a month all together. And that's just on average or whatever. So if my property right now with property management is cash flowing, $500 to $700 a month, and I go, to school here, right, and I get another $2,400 a month in BAH for the next 4 years, I have financial freedom. And
that's it.
And that's just, the very bare minimum. I'm trying, that's obviously not stopping there, but it gives me the freedom to where I can go to school, and then I can become a little bit more creative with where I want to go. I can start a business. I can go work underneath someone and say, hey, let me work for you. You don't have to pay me right now. Like,
yes,
like that kind of thing. That gives a lot of doors hopefully opening along the way that, you don't have if you don't do the right things in the beginning, which there's no necessarily like right beginning point. The only best beginning point is right now. Like,
that's it, man. That's a really good example, man. I want to share something with you, man. You are the standard, man. Like, being a young Marine. How old are you again?
I am 24.
24 years old, y'all. 24 years old, buying $1 million properties, getting to the bag, baby. You hear it. It's real. It's real. So the biggest thing that I will definitely say, man, is that I see a young, hungry entrepreneur. I hope to see you on the show later, because I know you're going to duplicate that process. Now that you have that one and you figured it out, it's kind of like driving. Once you compete it, you continue to do it, you're going to get better and better at it. And like I said, I see myself in you. I was a young sergeant when I really got into getting more heavily into the investment side. I had already owned properties before, but actually looking at it from the investor's perspective, the investor's lens, it catapulted me into a different vision, right? And, it gave me a lot of freedom. So before you are driving Porsches in, San Diego, and you start losing your hairline, man, don't forget the little people on the podcast. Make sure that you reach out to us and tell us about your story. But I'm immensely thankful for you coming on. I'm glad that I was able to open up someone or impact you on getting into the real estate game. And I'm excited to see what the future brings.
Yeah, no, you definitely, you are the spark to change my life for much, much of the better. So
I'm thankful for that.
Eternally grateful to you for it. So I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on. Let me, hopefully give a nugget to somebody along the way and give back to what I've gotten so far. So.
Indeed. So I have a couple of more questions before we wrap this thing up. The first thing is that, what advice would you give someone attempting to get into the real estate space? And then also, how can they reach you? Can they follow you on Instagram?
Yeah, I have an Instagram. It's Koonsinator. So my last name, KOONSINATOR. But I have to say my best advice and something that sticks with me is I would rather be right alone than wrong together. So all these people who say that real estate, it's too expensive or they don't want to get into it, it's like, yeah, but how many of them have the freedom to do what they want, when they want, where they want, with who they want at any time of the day?
Wow, man. That's powerful, man. Did y'all hear that? I hope y'all got that message. That was a powerful, powerful message. And I always tell people to do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. You got to get started, man. You can't hit the ball if you don't get up on the plate and grab the bat, man. Okay. So I really, really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again. And then also any closing words that you want to say?
No, I just get into it. Old adage, I've heard a million times now, is best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is right now. Do it, get into it, figure it out along the way.
Oh, thanks again, ladies and gentlemen, for following us and tuning in to the SITREP podcast. Make sure you click the subscribe button and then share the link and then follow us on Instagram. Let's go. Get to the bag, baby. Out.